come to school for hybrid, which is where you would come probably like twice a week. You would attend your live synchronous classes in person with your teacher. And then the other days of the week, you would be at home working on your asynchronous work. So the schedule would be pretty much the same. It's just that you would go to school on one of the A days and one of the B days and actually go through your schedule. So they need to get some feedback on that. I don't know what they're going to pick, but some people seem to think that if they look at other districts, that they might go the same direction. But I think that they're waiting to get feedback from people and also to see what happens with the virus in the next couple of weeks. But that's where we are with that. Are there any questions about any of that stuff? I don't know how much people tell you guys about things, and I feel like I would want to know if I was in your position. So is there anything? If I don't know, I can ask or check. No. Well, we'll see over the next couple weeks. Keep your eyes peeled for that survey, and you know, make sure that you fill it out. Right now, they were saying that they think 30% of the student population at our school would want to come to hybrid. So they're kind of planning in that direction. I think that's going to change now that we've started virtual instruction. I feel like maybe people have different opinions about what they want to do, but anyway, make sure that you look at that so that they can plan accordingly and make decisions. Did everybody have a chance to send me a little message? Later on, I'll make some groups and we'll just use those groups whenever we meet up. I know it's awkward to be in a group with people that you might not know. They do that to us all the time in the trainings. Oh, hi, stranger. I know it's awkward. All right, I'm going to switch over to Blackboard. So if you have your Blackboard class open, we have module 3 for week 3. Week 3 sounds like progress, but then it doesn't. I don't know. Week 3 kind of sounds like, well, we're in week 3, but then it also sounds like hardly any time has passed. This week, we're going to be focusing on character development and setting as it applies to short fiction. And we'll also be introduced to the concept of critical lenses. We have a paper coming up. There are 2 main papers for this class, the research papers later in the semester, but we do have an analytical paper that's coming up. I think I'll introduce it next week. I think it's on the schedule for next week. So that paper is going to ask you to use critical lenses. So this week we have a little bit of an introduction to critical lenses. And I'll talk to you about that toward the end of the period. A couple topics before we get into today's lesson. Just a reminder about attendance. You can't think about attendance anymore like the way that we used to think about attendance. So I've been getting emails sometimes. I tried to put out a message on Google Classroom about attendance and how it works. If you're marked absent, most of us are correcting our attendance the next day. So yes, you have until the end of the day, 11:59, to do your attendance assignment, but we're not sitting there at 11:59 checking everybody in for attendance. You know what I mean? So if after 4 o'clock, if it says absence because you didn't do your attendance assignment, then that can still be corrected the next day. Every once in a while, I get a couple of emails for like, you marked me absent and I did my thing. I'm like, well, you did your thing at 9:45 p.m. I'm going to catch it the next day, right? So keep that in mind, that the attendance takes a day before it kicks in. After a day, if the whole next day goes by and you're still marked absent when you did your assignment, and this is for any class, you should probably email your instructor and just make sure. There's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things that we're required to do in certain periods of time, and it's just a lot. So it could slip somebody's mind. Are there any questions about attendance? You do need 90% attendance in your classes, like usual, and just like we would if we were, face-to-face in the classroom. So keep up with that. Google Classroom. It occurred to me this weekend when I was working on preparing for this week that maybe a lot of people use Google Classroom as an organizer. Do y'all use it that way? Like, you sign into Google, I'm trying to envision how it is for you. Do you sign into Google Classroom and like all the tiles are there for your classes and underneath it's got what you should be working on? Do you use that as a way to decide what you're going to do that day?
Yeah.
Because I know I put everything on Blackboard. I'm required to put it on Blackboard, but I could put assignments on the Google Classroom too. You wouldn't turn them in there, but they would be there so that when everything's together, maybe that would be more organized. Would that be helpful?
That would be preferred.
Okay, I can add them, and then that way if it won't pop up as something you have to turn in, or if it does, just mark done and it'll clear. But I'm thinking some people use that like a to-do list, right? And that way it reminds you when things are due and so on. So I'll just add that. If you don't use it that way, you can just ignore that. All of our assignments are basically coming in on Blackboard, but you know, I just felt like I know that we have to go a bunch of different places for a bunch of different things and it gets confusing. So I wanted to try to streamline for you all. This afternoon, I'll put them up there. So when those appear, just make sure that you realize they're not new assignments. I'm just trying to help you streamline. Also, you can use, you have a Google Calendar. Does anybody use Google Calendar? You might think about it. Google Calendar is good because you can import all of your assignments from Classroom, so they show up in the calendar. And also you can import all of your Zoom meetings so that they're right there on your calendar. So this is my Google Calendar, and you could see that all of my Zoom meetings are right here. I just click on it and go right to my meeting. So when I sign in the morning, I go to today, it takes me to that day, and I can see everything I have, including my Zoom classes. So, you know, you might think about that if you need an organizational strategy. If you have one that's working for you and you're not forgetting to go to classes or do any assignments, then I say stick with it. But if you're searching for a way to kind of organize yourself in this virtual school situation, maybe look at Calendar. It can be pretty helpful. All right, on to the lesson of the day. I wanted to take a little bit of time to go through the reading that you did for characterization and setting. So in your book, I had you read the chapter on characterization. There are a few notes that I want to go over and give you an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. Character's not new, but there are some terms that might be new to you in this chapter, and you should define them and be able to analyze these aspects in anything that we read. So it's not just going to be about identifying things, but also talking about the significance and the purpose for those in the pieces that we read. The first terms that you really need to make sure you have notes on is round and flat characters. I think it's good to think of them, the book doesn't say this, but I think that you can think of them as two-dimensional and three-dimensional, right? A two-dimensional thing is surface level, it doesn't have depth, it's just on the surface. So sometimes you have characters that just serve a purpose. You know, a message had to be delivered, so we've got a messenger. And so the messenger, we don't know about that messenger's backstory. We don't know about the parents or where they're from or what their future goals are, because they're just a flat character. A message just had to be delivered, right? A round character is more three-dimensional. So a round character, we have facets. We can see the depth of that character. We can see their thought process. We can see their emotional reactions. We can see their motivation. And there's a part in this chapter about motivation too. So it's kind of good to think about that. The characters that are round are usually the protagonist is usually a round character because they get developed through the course of the story, but there are other round characters sometimes. So it's good to distinguish between those two. They do talk about a couple of types of flat characters toward the end of that section. Stock characters, or sometimes we call them archetypal characters, ARCHETYPAL, archetypal characters, that are the same types of characters that show up a lot. You know, like the macho uncle, or the, damsel in distress, or the overbearing mother-in-law. Those characters show up in slightly different ways in different stories, different name, but it's the same basic character. And those are flat characters, and they pop up and we just say, oh, that's a stock character. I know that character because, that villain with the mustache has been in, tons of stories previously. A caricature is a character that is sort of extreme version of a stock character. So say there's the stock character of the nosy neighbor, right? And they're slightly different in different stories, but the nosy neighbor is a character type that shows up a lot. And if you had an extreme nosy neighbor, like an overdeveloped nosiness, then that would be a caricature. Maybe you've seen caricature portraits, right? Where they do a caricature of somebody's face, and if they have a large nose, it gets huge because they exaggerate those qualities. So a character, a flat character that's a caricature is, sort of like a, extra on that element. They talk about dynamic and static characters. You can kind of use science terminology here. Static characters in stasis. A static character doesn't change. They pretty much stay the same from beginning to end. Usually a protagonist will be a dynamic character because the change that the character goes through in the course of the story is usually the point of the story. So whatever journey the character is on, whether it's the hero's journey that you read about over the summer, or any mental journey, a physical journey, all of those things are part of growth. So there's something that the character is learning, something that they're realizing. And if you can nail down what the dynamic character is changing from and to, you probably have the deep meaning in the story. The little tip. So the dynamic character changes in some way from beginning to end. Now, it's not always super obvious. Sometimes it takes a second reading to really get into that. Like one of the stories that you'll read for next week called Araby is like that. It doesn't seem like a lot is happening in that story. So you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what is the journey here? What is this dynamic character learning, or how are they growing or understanding something about the world or themselves? And that usually will reveal the theme and the purpose of the text. So those are two different groups that you can categorize, characters into. Motivation, I think everybody knows what motivation is. I don't think I need to go into that. And at the end of the chapter, there are some questions that you might ask if you had to analyze for character. We do have an assignment this week for character analysis. And so these are the types of things that come up when we are asked to look in depth at a character. That's just a brief overview. I know you read the chapter, so is there anything else about the character chapter that I can talk about or go over with you? Any questions? No? Okay. The other chapter that you needed to read for today was on setting, so let me go through that one briefly as well. Cuckoo clock says it's noon. I think we're used to the idea of setting, but when we talk about, deep analysis, we want to make sure that we understand all aspects of setting. It's not as simple as saying, oh, it's, Hollywood in 1940. We have to think about the time of day that the story takes place, or multiple times of day, seasons. Seasons are usually symbolic in literature. We have to think about weather. We have to think about geographical location and historical context. It's important, and the book doesn't really go into this, but I think you should add a note. It's important that when we read works of literature that are written in a different time, that we kind of suspend our mindset of 2020. For example, for today, you should have read the story called Battle Royal. And Ralph Ellison wrote that story in the 1940s, pre-civil rights movement. And that story uses the N-word, and it's got some treatment that's very violent. And we have to keep in mind that that story is not taking place in our world today. So for a lot of the things that we read, we have to take our 2020 mindset and kind of just move it over a little bit and make room for the historical mindset. If we have a character that's treating women in a very misogynistic way, we have to say, okay, well, it was 1850 when the story was written, and we can't put the 21st century way of thinking onto this author and these characters. So lots of times I'll get people who say, oh, well, that character is racist. Well, yeah, that character is racist because look at the time period that this is happening. So Ralph Ellison couldn't have predicted the situation that we're in today with, Black Lives Matter movement. and all of those things. So it's important to just remember that when we talk about setting, we're talking about moving our mindset from our 2020 vision to our, sort of historical viewpoint. So they talk a little bit about some different settings. Historical setting, that's kind of what I'm talking about. They have some examples. For homework this week, you'll be reading The Yellow Wallpaper, and in that story, a woman is entrapped in her attic, and there are some ways that her husband treats her that would likely not happen very often in 2020. So because it happens in the late 19th century, this is where our understanding of history class overlaps with literature. We have to say, okay, well, what's going on politically and historically in this time period, and how does that play into this particular piece? So we start dovetailing history with literature when we start looking at setting in that way. Geographical setting, there are some geographical settings that will make sense to us because we're familiar with them, and there are some geographical settings that will not make sense. Culturally, we can understand a wide variety of backgrounds, but if we read a piece that was translated from, Finland, maybe we wouldn't understand the cultural norms and aspects of that place. So geographical setting is significant in a lot of ways, just for visuals, but also for understanding the mindset of the characters culturally. Physical setting, this is where we get into mood and atmosphere. I think that's mentioned toward the end of this section. Physical setting is usually to set a mood. If we have a creepy forest, or if we have, a sun-dappled picnic in a park, all those things are designed to create a certain environment in our mind as we read. And the author does all of those things on purpose, and they all have a purpose for our reading. So when we think about location, indoors, outdoors, sunny, rainy, all of those things are meant to evoke certain emotions in the characters and certain emotions in us as readers. And we have to pay attention to that when we look at setting. So setting can be highly symbolic, and it's important to pay attention to that and not just sort of breeze past the idea that it takes place in Chicago at the turn of the century or something like that. The last terms they have here are atmosphere or mood, and that's what I was talking about when I was saying that an atmosphere is sort of like creating the emotional state of the character through setting. And also the reader, we can be affected by a description of the setting. We can think something's creepy, or something is boring, or something has some certain qualities, or can give us a certain warm feeling of romance or whatever if it's a certain setting. So that's what we mean by atmosphere and mood. All right. There's some questions after that. If you're asked to write about setting, there's some things to think about. Any questions on that chapter? Anything you want me to go over or expand on? The way that I'll be testing your abilities with all these chapters is at the end, I'm going to give you a test, and I will give you a new story, and I will ask you to write about that story and analyze all of these aspects. So it's important that you can work through a new story in that way, using these techniques that we've been practicing each week and the notes that I've been going through with you. All right. The next thing that I want us to do today is get started on our assignment. This week we have an assignment called, it's a characterization chart. And if you go in Blackboard to the bottom down here, you'll see that the chart is right here. If you click on it, it's in Word format. So you'll have to open that. So this is where our groups come in a little bit today. I thought that instead of hearing me blab for the whole period, that you might want to, meet up with some classmates and start working on your assignment. So I'll walk you through the assignment and then I'll put you into some random groups and you can maybe discuss and work through it a little bit, maybe for 20, 25 minutes or so. I'll pop into the rooms to see how you're doing. But let me go through the assignment first so that everybody knows what we're working on. So what I'd like you to do is choose one of the two stories for this week, either 56 to 0 or Battle Royal. Either one is fine. I want you to choose the protagonist as the character that you'll be analyzing on this chart. So you can write that character's name and which piece it comes from, the title and author up here. Your goal is to fully analyze the character. And you can see that I've given elements over here on the left that I want you to look at. There are 2 pages to this doc, so make sure that you get to the second page. Things like, what are the physical qualities? What are the appearance and interactions with others and types of speech that the character gives off? What does the author give us about the physical qualities? And you're going to put the answer to that kind of right here in this box. The next box over to the right is taking it to the next level. The next level is, so what? So if I look at the key qualities of, let's say, Ray Arthur Larry Pete Fontenot from 56 to 0, that character is big and burly. He's a football player, but he's damaged. He's been through a lot of injuries, and they just had a horrible game, and he's all cracked up. The whole first part of the story is a description of that. So in this section, I would put about how he's large, he's buffalo-like, but he is damaged. He's broken and physically. Then I have to ask myself for this column, why? Why does the author set that protagonist up with that particular description? So I have to kind of do an interpretation, right? I have to think to myself, well, he's broken on the outside and he's also broken on the inside with his life. At the end of that story, unfortunately, T.C. Boyle does not give us a happy ending, and Ray Arthur Larry Pete is broken completely at the end of the story. So I could say that the significance of that physical description is that his future's broken, he's broken emotionally and physically too. So the fact that the author created him that way physically helps me understand his future. I mean, even at the end, doesn't it talk about how his future, he looked into a future and all he saw was, this sort of unpleasant wife and unpleasant children, and it's pretty much all over for him in his mind. So this column is for taking it to that interpretive level, and this column is for just responding to how it shows up in the text. I also want you to look at the intangible qualities. Those are the things that are not directly stated, things like emotions and attitudes and motives. What are the conflicts of the character? What are the contradictions in the character's persona? Sometimes you have a character that's got 2 competing elements, right? Maybe they're happy all the time, but they're frustrated on the inside, right? So sometimes you can look at the contradictions that are present in the text also. Look also, there's a section here for setting. How does the character interact with setting? So that's important. The nature of the character's growth, we talked about that dynamic character that has a growth arc in the story. So make sure that you can identify what is the growth that happens, what's the understanding that the character comes to. And then metaphorically, what does the character seem to represent? Symbolically, what is this character standing for? So that is like how you do a complete characterization of a character. Are there any questions about the chart? I'm going to set you off to work on it a little bit. This thing on? No questions? All right, I'm going to put you into some groups. I know they're random for today, but try your best. Try to have a conversation with the people in your group. It's okay if you don't choose the same story, because you can just talk about these character elements. Everybody's read both stories, so you can rely on each other to, talk through ideas. and start working on your chart. You are not submitting a group assignment. You'll be submitting your own chart. This is going to be due on Friday, but I want you to get a start on it today, and I'll be popping into the rooms to see if I can help you in case you run into any trouble, or maybe there's something from the story that you want me to, the stories that you want me to go over with you in your groups. Okay? Any questions on what we're doing right now when we go into the session, the breakouts? All right, I'm going to put you into a breakout group then. We'll be in the breakout rooms for about 20, 25 minutes. Your goal is to start working on your assignment and use the people in your group to help you get started. So I'll come through in a few minutes and see how everybody's doing. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to get started on that assignment. I know it's a little awkward being thrown randomly in there, but we'll try to have some different groups next time. Hopefully that will help you all. I want to spend the last few minutes of class going over the assignments for the week. So if there are any questions, you can ask me while we're here live. And also remember that I'm recording the classes. So I made a playlist on my YouTube channel, and you can always go to that playlist to watch any class periods that you might have missed, or if you need to go back over notes or anything. The way you can find that is on the Start Here page. I'm going to come back to this page in a minute. But I put it right here on this important links part. Here's where we have our class time Zoom link. Here's where I'm available in the after school times. Here's a link to formative. And then right here where it says class video playlist, every day that we have synchronous class, I'm just going to upload the class period there. So if you ever need to go back, or if for some reason you can't make it to the synchronous class, you can always do your formative and then watch that video. I don't think it's the best way, but it's at least a solution in case you can't make it to class. It's always better to be in class so that you can ask questions and that sort of thing, but that's there. So let me just go through the things for this week. Obviously, that characterization chart is due on Friday at the end of the day, 11:59. I will be available in my office hours on Thursday and Friday, just live sitting there. So if you want to drop in and ask me if you're doing it right, or if you have a question about something, that last column's a little tough, right? The one about the interpretation part. So if you are want to go through that with me or get some help on that, then I'll be available. Or you can also just email me if you have a quick question. Also, there's formatives. There's 3 of them this week because it's a B week. So there's one today, and there's one on Thursday, and there's one on Friday. Friday's a B day. I am grading the formatives. When you go in there, you can see that I put some comments. I'm usually interacting with you on there, with your ideas that you're presenting and that sort of thing. And then you're also getting up to 5 points per formative. So 5 is the top number. That's like 100. If your answer is in depth and it answers all the parts of the question, then that's 5 points. If it's pretty good, it's a 4. If it's a 3, that's kind of like maybe just a basic answer, and then there's 2s and 1s, but that's usually if they're off topic or whatever. So I am grading them. The way that shows up in the grade book is every 6 weeks, there will be 2 columns. They're already in the grade book, actually. One column I will fill in right before progress reports. So I don't know, it's like another week, maybe this Friday or next Friday, I have to turn in progress reports. So I'll just go over to formative and I'll look at your average of your percent on your formatives. Not that you've done them, but what the grade is. So if it says 91, then I'm just going to go ahead and put a 91 in that column for formatives right before progress reports. Then there's another column right before report cards, and I'll do the same thing there. The difference is that before progress reports, it's a minor grade, and before the report card, it's a major grade. I think that those questions are not easy. I think that they take you time to sit and respond to, so I want them to count. So they're counting for attendance, but also for a grade. So when you do the formative, I'm asking questions for deeper thought, and that's gonna, end up coming out in your percentage. So you can kind of track your percentage, I think, there on that formative site and see what your average is on those. And if you want your average to go up, just do more 5-point answers. So that's the thing. And don't miss them, of course, because of attendance. But those formatives are important. So keep in mind, put them on your planner or your reminder or whatever for today, Thursday, and Friday. All right, besides that and the chart, the only other things that you need to do are before next class period, which is next Tuesday, the 15th. So one of the things that we need to start getting familiar with is critical lenses. That might be a new topic for you, or it might not, I don't know. But this week I wanted you to kind of learn about what critical lenses are. Our first paper is going to ask you to use a critical lens, so you'll have to have an understanding of what those are to write the paper. So this week I have a video. This critical lenses in literature is like a 10-minute video that somebody else made about critical lenses, but I think it's a pretty good overview. And then this slideshow is one that I made for you, which is just an overview of critical lenses. There are different types of critical lenses, so we'll go into the different types in the next week or two. But I just want you to orient yourself to the concept. And so make sure that you review those. Also, there is a chapter I want you to read, point of view. We're moving through all of the terminology and we're on point of view. So make sure that you read that. I did not put the PDF. Does everybody have their book now? Is there anybody who doesn't have their book from school? If you don't have your book, then send me a message, because I'm not going to put the PDFs up here anymore unless if you need them, I'll send them to you. But the books are all available at school. So read and take notes on point of view. Obviously, we'll go through the same pattern. Next Tuesday, I'll put it up there. We'll talk about it. I'll just add to your notes and move on. Answer any questions. And there are 2 stories to read for next week, The Yellow Wallpaper and Araby. Those 2 stories are a little shorter than the stories that you read for this week. I would say each one is maybe 5.5 pages, something like that, maybe. So, oops. So that should be a little bit shorter. They are a little bit older though. So those pieces are on the older side. Yellow Wallpapers, sort of the end of the 19th century. Araby's at the turn of the 20th century. So there might be more things that you have to look up. Sometimes when you get an older piece like that, that's 100 years old, you have to look up references and some terminology. But do make sure that you do that. All right. Any questions? Well, I hope you got a head start on your assignment that's due on Friday. If something comes up, please just send me a message and I'll respond to you, or you can drop in on the live Zoom, the office hours that I'll have on Thursday and Friday in the afternoon. All right. All right. Good job today, guys. Go forth and learn. I'm proud of you. Do your best. And I'll see you next Tuesday, okay? Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Thomas.
Yeah.
I don't know if I was given the right book.
Okay, show it to me.
Is this it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. That's fine then.
Okay, sounds good.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.